Hi, I'm Ryan Johnson, and one of the owners here at the Gilded Blades Publishing Group. I'm also one of the designers of 1483. And today I want to talk about a new feature for the upcoming Full World 1483 game. Full World is introducing a couple of new features, one of which is very powerful in regards to the way it's going to shift the way people want to play naval powers or even guard land powers. Full World introduces a new element called Deep Sea Zones. If you've already got the demo version, or if down the road you have the full version of Full World 1483, you open it up, you'll notice that some of the sea zones have different colors. You got coastal territories, for the most part, are lighter blue, and then you look into like the lower Indian Ocean or the middle of the Atlantic, middle of the Pacific, you'll see a bunch of very large sea zones that are a darker blue. These are called deep sea zones. Now, deep sea zones change the dynamic of play in 1483 fairly substantially for naval powers. And the reason this is, if you just take a look at the size of those deep sea zones, they're huge. I mean, one deep sea zone can be the size of 10 or 20 smaller normal sea zones. When you're moving your ships around the map, it still only takes you one movement point to move into one of those big deep sea zones. So yeah, you can go up and down the coastline of, say, if you're going up, starting in England, you're going down the coastlines of, off the coast of France and Spain. You'll go from England down to about Gibraltar, and that's about as far as you can move. However, if you were to take some of those movements, move out to one of the deep sea zones, get into one of those with one of your movements, say off the coast of Ireland, move into one of the Atlantic deep sea zones, and then move south, one movement point, you're going to move from one of the northern Atlantic deep sea zones to one of the southern Atlantic deep sea zones. That's just one two move. So you went from England basically to down the Horn of Africa in one swap of movement. So these deep sea zones are going to very dramatically change how naval powers can move forces around in play. And it's not just the Englands. I mean, anybody with a merchantman and a few guys they can load on it can jump on those ships, move their ships into and through the deep sea zones to get around the world ocean pretty quickly. I'm going to just give you an example of this just so people can really think of the ramifications of this. Let's say, for example, England or Scotland have conquered Ireland. So now they have a naval force sitting off the coast of Ireland, and the southern sea zone off the coast of Ireland. On turn one, they can load all their guys up onto their ships. Now, they can't move them because they just loaded them. Now, on turn two, that sea zone borders one of the deep sea zones. So on turn two, it starts moving. It jumps into the deep sea zone, goes in the Atlantic, goes into another deep sea zone down further, and then exits out of the deep sea zone. I'll explain why you probably want to do that later. On its third move into one of the local sea zones down near the Horn of Africa, down to the near the Cape of Good Hope. So all that is on one turn of movement. Next turn of movement, you hit another deep sea zone, one of the Indian Ocean deep sea zones, and by the end of your move, you're landing in one of the sea zones off the coast of Western Australia. That's right, just two turns, you went from Ireland to the western coast of Australia, with however many guys you were able to load up on those ships. So getting colonies started on the far-flung edges of this map is definitely possible. The only question is whether you bring enough force to hold the land that you took and then build cities or capture cities over there. That would be the key. But, in 1483, sometimes you see the formation of fairly sizable alliances, or one nation just gets on a conquering spree and gets up to 200, 300, 400 resources in full world. It's not too hard to take a peg down on them because let's just say you're China, and let's say China survives the early stages of the game. And if you've played a few games of Full World 1483, you know what I mean by that. Let's say they survive and they expand the Great Chinese Empire. They control most of Asia. Now they got a coastline going from Siberia all the way down to India that they have to protect. Their great conquering armies are moving inland, and so they got a very large force moving westerly through Central Asia, and there's maybe a big old batch of nations trying to defend that land. The very fact that they have so much open ocean from all the way from India all the way up to Siberia in the full world game is going to be a great challenge for them to defend, because In the same fashion that England can move a force from England to off the coast of Australia in 2 turns, in about 3 or 4 turns, pretty much anybody in Europe is going to be able to throw troops on ships and get them off the coast of Asia anywhere. So, abandoning your rear guard to throw all your troops onto a landmass battle somewhere half a nation away isn't necessarily going to be a good thing for you, because the ocean is no longer is no longer going to be a safe haven for you. You're going to have to garrison those lands, or somebody's going to come in with a fleet from halfway around the world and get you. So that's something very, very new, made possible by the deep sea zones, and everybody's going to have to keep that in mind when playing. The other couple things about deep sea zones that are very unique is this. Because in 1483, you had basically sailing ships. They weren't the safest ships in the world to sail. Even today, we lose, in modern era, we lose ships due to rough seas sometimes. It happens. Well, in 1483, there was a very good reason why ships liked to follow the coastal, because if a storm came up, you'd go to an island off the coast, or you go to the coast if it was a friendly nation. You'd port your ship and ride out the storm. Well, when you're in the middle of the deep Atlantic or the deep Pacific, you're not near a coastline. The storm hits you. You're just not heading to port and riding it out. You got to ride it out there in the middle of these deep sea zones. For this reason, and because you have no safe haven to travel in, deep sea zones are a dangerous place to finish your turn. Every time you have a ship or a group of ships that ends a turn in a deep sea zone, each ship in your fleet is going to have a 3 in 10 chance of being lost to storms at sea. Now, this is counterbalanced by one good positive thing. Because also deep sea zones are just so enormous in size, and because none of these ships obviously have radar or anything else like that working for them at this in the medieval times, there are no naval combats possible in deep sea zones. So if you're running away, while it's risky, 3 in 10 chance of getting sunk, it may be a better option than a 10 in 10 chance of getting sunk by a much more superior enemy fleet. So those are 2 unique new features of deep sea zones in full world, and we feel it's going to very much impact some of the strategies you're going to want to employ. So just wanted to make you aware of these new features, and happy gaming.